Well, the minimum wage law sounds like a good law because, we all want to help the poor. And one way to help them is to raise their wages. And, if we can raise their wages, they'll be better off, other things equal. And a lot of people, Bernie Sanders, Sam Seder, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Many people favor the minimum wage law. Even economists who should know better, like Paul Krugman, favors the minimum wage law. And a lot of young people who don't know economics and a lot of middle-aged and old people who don't know economics also favor the minimum wage. And they think the minimum wage is sort of like a floor, and you raise it and then wages go up. And, you have to be pretty callous to oppose that. You have to hate the poor. And I don't hate the poor. I want to help the poor. It's just that I don't see the minimum wage as a floor undergirding wages. And then as you raise it, wages rise. Rather, I see the minimum wage law as a barrier over which you have to jump to get a job. And the higher it is, the harder it is to jump. And when it gets high enough, you can't jump over it. But before we get into minimum wage, what we should probably do is try to determine what determines wages in the absence of any law. A lot of people think, well, if there were no law, wages would be zero. Well, maybe not zero, but a penny or, a nickel an hour. Well, we economists have a theory as to what determines wages, and our theory, and I think it's not just Austrian libertarian economists, but just mainstream economists have a theory that wages are determined by productivity. So you might say, well, what's productivity? Well, productivity is how much you add to the bottom line. Now, suppose I have a productivity of $20 an hour. And what does that mean? It means that every hour I'm on your shop floor or in your factory or tutoring you or whatever it is that I'm doing for you, you're my employer, your receipts go up by $20. That's all it means. That every hour you have me on, say, your shop floor producing widgets or producing shoes, let's say shoes, I'm producing shoes for you, I'm on your factory, I don't know how you produce shoes. I think you go like this, but I'm not sure. But I'm in there, I'm producing shoes for you. And every hour you have me there, your receipts go up by $20. And if when I leave, your receipts go down by $20 an hour. So you attribute $20 an hour wages productivity to me. Well, so what's my wage going to be? Well, if you offer me $50 an hour, you're going to lose $30 an hour. So you better not do that. And if you're stupid enough to do that, you're going to go broke because you're not just offering me $50 an hour when I'm producing 20, but you're stupid and you're offering all your employees way more than their productivity. Your history, your company is not a viable company. So you can't be paying, at least in the long run, okay, maybe 1 hour you screw up and pay me $30 extra, you lose 30 on me. You can suffer that, or you can overcome that. But if you make this a habit of paying wages higher than productivity levels, your history, you're going to go bankrupt. Okay, so wages can't be above productivity levels. Well, now let's suppose that you offer me $1 an hour. You're generous. You're not offering me a nickel or a penny an hour. You're generous. You're offering me $1 an hour. And remember, I'm worth 20 an hour. Well, now you're doing pretty well. You're making $19 an hour profit off of me. Isn't that great? Applause for you. That's great. But is this viable? Is this going to last very long? Not really, because there are two sources of undermining this arrangement that you and I now have. Remember, I'm producing $20 an hour worth for you, and you pay me $1 an hour. You're making 19 an hour profit off of me. And it's not just me, but there are 100 people in your company working in your factory, and you're paying all of us $1 an hour. Why won't this last? Why won't it last? Because there are other shoe companies that are in competition with you. And not just shoe companies, but if I'm producing $20 in shoes, I could probably do something on shirts, and I could probably do something on making chairs. Who knows? I'm a semi-skilled worker. $20 an hour, pretty decent. I can produce. Well, somebody out there is going to say, hey, Walter, come work for me. I'll pay you $2 an hour. And I'll make 18 profit, but better than I make 18 profit than Ben makes 19 profit. And then somebody's going to say, well, how about I'll come work for me? I'll pay you $3 an hour. And where is this going? Well, it's going up toward 20. Namely, there's a vacuum or an imbalance or some screw up here where you're making vast profits off of my labor, and other people would like to make profits off of my labor and other employees of yours. And the wage is going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up toward 20. Because suppose my wage is 19. You're making $1 profit off of me. Somebody's going to be offering me 1905 or 1925, right? Bidding me away from you. So that's one source of the fact that it's not an equilibrium. It's not a viable situation. The other source is I'm going to go to other employees. I'm going to say, hey, Ben is paying me $1 an hour. But I think I can produce more than $1 an hour. How about you hiring me for $2 an hour? And the guy gives me a tryout, and he says, wow, I'll pay you $3. And we see where that's going. So there are two sources where it'll shown to be not viable, not a long run situation. One, other employers will bid for my wages, my labor away from you. And secondly, I and your other employees are going to look around for other jobs, and we're going to see we're vastly underpaid, and the wage will tend to be 20. Will it always be 20? No, sometimes it'll be 21, sometimes it'll be 19, but it's sort of like when you shoot a gun or an arrow at a bullseye and you're only 5 feet away. You're not going to hit the bullseye every time, but you're going to get close. Well, we have that theory that wages will tend to equal productivity. Okay, so now I'm worth $20 an hour. And what you do is you set up a minimum wage law of $30 an hour. Will that help me? Will my wages rise because the minimum wage law says you got to pay me 30 and I'm only worth 20? The law doesn't change my productivity. No, I'll be unemployed because if you hire me, you're going to be paying $10 an hour more than my productivity. You're going to make a loss on me, so you're not going to hire me. Namely, my productivity is 20, but now the minimum wage is 30, and I've got to jump over a 30 barrier to get a job, and I can't. I'm not that productive. Okay, so we're now using the example of 20 and 30. A more realistic example is 725. Right now, the minimum wage law is 725. Well, what about people whose productivity is only $4 an hour? Well, look, if your productivity is only $4 an hour, you're not that very skilled. We're talking about people that have problems. Maybe they're teenagers, maybe they're dropouts, maybe they're slightly mentally handicapped and they can only produce $4 an hour. They work slowly, or they don't take orders that well, or whatever it is. They can't get a job. They're unemployed right now. Now, Bernie Sanders and the boys want to raise it to 15. And somehow they think they're going to help somebody who now has a job whose productivity is $8 an hour. And he can get a job because the minimum wage is only $7.25, so he can jump over that barrier. But you make it 15, and all of a sudden it's very hard for him to get a job, because every time he gets a job, he produces $8 an hour, and you're paying him 15. You're losing $7 an hour off of him. So this, in a nutshell, is the case against the minimum wage law.
All right. I wanted to do a little bit of devil's advocate, even though I'm very bad at it because I just find it hard to, present arguments I strongly disagree with. But let me think. The first thing I would ask is, what about the people who say, or what if I said, the demand for labor is inelastic? So, it doesn't matter if you raise wages. It doesn't matter if you raise the minimum wage because, people still have to buy laborers. They still have to pay for labor and people's time.
Well, if the demand for labor is inelastic, I don't see how that is going to change what I just said. It just means that fewer people will be unemployed. I wish we had a diagram we could write on, but we don't have it, so we'll just talk without. I feel naked without a blackboard. I'm an economics professor. I need a blackboard, otherwise I'll go berserk here. But I'll try without the blackboard. What I said still holds true. That if my productivity is $27 an hour and the minimum wage law is 15, well, I'm not going to get a job. So I don't see how that really impacts what I said. Now, if you had a supply and demand diagram, if the demand curve is very elastic, there's going to be a ton of unemployment. And if it's rather inelastic, there'll be less unemployment, but there'll still be some unemployment because you have to think of a supply and demand curve. And when the wage is above the equilibrium, supply is greater than demand. If the demand curve is inelastic, it won't be too much of a gap. If it's the demand curve is elastic, it'll be a big gap. So it will have impact on how many people are unemployed, but not on whether there'll be some people unemployed. Now, the elasticity of demand curves is a function of a lot of things. One of the things that it's a function of is time. The more time you allow, the more elastic the demand curve gets. For example, suppose right now shoes are $20 and somehow I raise the price of shoes to $30. Well, right now you need shoes, you're barefoot. But if I give you enough time, eventually you'll find alternatives. My shoe store is just raised it, and the only shoe store is mine, but you're going to go looking for other shoe stores. Let me give you another example. I tell you that you can buy a Cadillac for $5. Are you interested? Say yes. Work with me here. How many more Cadillacs do you think the Cadillac stores will sell at $5 in the next second?
Probably all of them.
No, none. 1 second is too short to get out to the Cadillac dealership.
Yeah.
Look, you're sitting in Tennessee. I don't know where you are in Tennessee, but unless you're right on top of a Cadillac distributorship, you can't go buy a Cadillac in 1 second, right? If I give you 5 minutes, you're going to have a hard time getting to the Cadillac place in 5 minutes. Give you a half hour, you'll be there. Namely, the more time I give you, the more elastic the demand curve is for Cadillacs or shoes or whatever. So yes, the demand curve in the instantaneous run is very inelastic. But as you go along a little bit, look, let me give you an example, an actual example. The minimum wage law was raised from 40 cents to 70 cents. I forget when it was, in the 30s somewhere. And in the 30s, when you went into an elevator, there was an elevator operator there. There was this guy standing there. He wasn't a pervert. He was working in the elevator. He was the elevator operator. There were automatic elevators in the 30s, but they were very expensive. And when the wage of elevator operators was 40 cents, it was very difficult to cost benefit justify substituting an automatic elevator for a manually operated elevator. So in the next week, how many elevators were converted from manual to automatic? None, because it takes more than a week to convert. I mean, to take out the manually operated elevator and put in an automatic elevator takes a couple of months. And there are only so many people that can do it, so they can't get rid of all the manually operated elevators. But in 2, 3, 4 years, there are no more manually operated elevators. They're all automatic. right? So
Right.
the point is that the demand curve for labor, for what do you call it, manual elevator operators, was very inelastic within a week or within a month. None of them got fired. They all went from 40 cents to 70 cents. And everyone said, whoa, minimum wage law is great, right? But eventually they all lost their jobs. And now there are no more manually operated elevators, right? So yes, demand curves are very inelastic in the short run. Look, in the instantaneous run, they're all zero elasticity. Like I gave you the case of buying a Cadillac for $5 in 1 second from now. You know, the number of Cadillacs sold in 1 second doesn't change. Let me give you another example. Why do pitchers throw the ball? Do you know what the world's record is for a pitcher to throw a ball to the batter? It's around 108 miles an hour.
I don't know.
It's really fast. That's the world's record. Now, a very good pitcher can go 85, 90 miles an hour. Why do they throw it so fast? Because they don't want the batter to adjust. When they pitch batting practice, they'll throw it at 45 miles an hour to give confidence to the batter. And then everyone hits the ball out of the park, right? The more time you have to adjust, the more you can adjust. When you throw the ball at 95 miles an hour, the batter really can't adjust. It's very hard to hit the ball. When you throw it at 45 miles an hour, he's got twice as much time. The more time, the more you can adjust. The more time, the more elastic the demand curve is. So you're right. Instantaneously, you raise the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15. Nobody's going to lose his job the next day because the demand curves are very inelastic. But the next week, 1 or 2 guys will lose their job. The next month, another few. The next 2 months, a lot of people are going to start losing their jobs because we get substitutes. We substitute machinery for labor. They're now putting in all sorts of things at McDonald's where, you used to go to McDonald's and you'd go up to somebody and say, hey, I want a burger. Now what you do is you go up to a screen and you press burger, right? Namely, the machinery is substituting for the labor, for unskilled labor. But it takes time to put the machine in. It takes time for people to get adjusted to using the computers, right? So my answer, to be more succinct, is yes, if demand curves are very inelastic, then my argument is less powerful. But over time, demand curves become more elastic, and then the demand curve is very, very bad.
Right. I have another one. Now, you don't have to go too in depth with this one if you don't want to, because I know, like, as someone who's kind of refuted this argument before in videos, I know it can take a while going, because there's so much wrong with it. But if I were to present this argument, I've got a fancy little graph here. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe probably not.
Sorry, I can't see it. Push it further. Yeah, I see.
Wage. Oops.
I don't see the axes, but I see a curve going.
I've got productivity and wages, hourly compensation. I don't know if you've seen this graph before. This is from the Economic Policy Institute. It's a very famous graph. I think it's actually showing up backwards for you. Let me flip it real quick. I don't know if I can do that, but yeah. So a lot of people cite this and they say, well, wages aren't keeping up with productivity. And so if I were to say, well, that means, if wages should be attached to productivity, like you said in the beginning, then we should raise the minimum wage in order to adjust to that.
You say you're not a very good devil's advocate, but you're doing a pretty good job. That's a very, very important argument that you're making. It really doesn't have anything to do with the minimum wage. Rather, what it is an attack on my first claim, namely that wages tend to reflect productivity. So forget about the minimum wage. We're now saying, we're now casting aspersions on my claim that wages tend to reflect productivity. And my answer to that is, productivity is very hard to measure. And the best example I have is Jeremy Lin. Jeremy Lin was a, do you know who he was or who he is? No,
I don't.
okay. Jeremy Lin is a Chinese guy who was a basketball player. He was in the NBA, the National Basketball Association. And he's a shrimp. He's only 6'2", 6'3". And in the NBA, you're a shrimp if you're 6'2", 6'3". If you want to have a decent size, you have to be 6'8", and then you go on upward from there. So he was really very short, although there are guards who are around 6'2". So he wasn't, and there are guys who are 5'10", very rare. But also he graduated from Harvard. And somehow people figured that if you graduated from Harvard, you really can't play in the NBA. And if you're that short, you can't play in the NBA. And if you're Chinese, you can't play in the NBA unless you're 7'6", like Yao Ming. Namely, very important, high-paid basketball, scouts were trying to evaluate his ability. And they misevaluated his productivity, his ability, his productivity. Namely, he was, I think, on the San Francisco team for a while, and he just sat on the bench. He was the 15th best player, and he never got into a game except for garbage time. Namely, when your team is 50 points ahead of the other guy or 50 points below the other guy, you put in all the reserves, let him play around for 5 minutes. And then he was on the New York Knicks, and again, he was on the bench. And then what happened one day, the 2 or 3 guards ahead of him either got sick or fouled out, and they put him in the game, and he scored 15 points and 15 assists in about 15 minutes, which is very, very good. What I'm trying to say is that highly paid scouts who were charged with the task of evaluating the productivity or the ability of a basketball player made horrendous mistakes in assessing his productivity. They assign him to the bench for these silly reasons that he's Chinese and not 7'9", and he went to Harvard and he's, I don't know, too short or whatever. I'm trying to say that there's a lot of guessing about productivity. Remember I said I came to your store or your factory and I produced $20 more? Well, maybe it was because of the weather. Or maybe because everybody else worked harder when I was there. You get what I'm saying? It's very hard to determine what is my productivity. You just have to guess. And if you guess correctly, you make money. And if you guess badly, you lose money. If you think that my productivity is $50 and it's only 20, you're gonna lose money. If you think my productivity is $5 and you pay me 20, you're gonna lose out as well. I'll go elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say is that we have very good statistics for wages, right? We know what my wage is. We know what your wage is. You pay taxes. You have to write it down. Okay, there's a little cheating. Some people cheat on their taxes, but we have very good statistics on wages. We have no statistics on productivity. Yes, the left-wing think tanks say, well, productivity is rising and wages are flat. I don't know that. I don't trust them. I don't believe that. I have this theory that wages and productivity have to be very, very close, because if they're not, there are market forces that are brought to bear. So when they say productivity is flat and, productivity is rising and wages are flat, I say, well, how do you know that? And they say, oh, we took a study. Yeah. That would be my answer, that the statistics are false, that productivity is a very, I wouldn't say nebulous thing, but very hard to grab onto, and productivity keeps changing. I walk into the office and I walk into your shoe factory, and you know what my productivity is the first 5 minutes? It's negative. Why? Because I'm busy taking off my coat and I'm busy saying hello to buddies of mine and stopping them from working. And then I don't know. Then I have a hot streak, and I'm producing shoes at the rate of $100 an hour for a time. But then I get a little hungry and I need a bathroom break, and I start gossiping with my fellow person, and now my productivity is negative. Namely, productivity goes like this. I don't produce $20 every hour, right? Look, I'm a writer. I do writing. And I tell you, sometimes I'm really producing, at least to my satisfaction. Other times I'm looking at chess puzzles, or I'm playing solitaire because the ideas aren't coming. You get it? So productivity is a very difficult thing to grab onto. It's sort of like nailing jelly to the tree. Very hard to nail it. And these people are saying, well, productivity is rising all over the place, but rather wages are rising, but I'm sorry, I'm getting that mixed up. They're saying that productivity is rising, but wages are flat. Well, I believe them when they say wages are flat, but I'm very suspicious when they say productivity is rising for the whole country. Now, maybe they took a study of something and they were very meticulous about some small industry or some small company, and they measured it very carefully, which even then I doubt. Namely, I trust much more this axiom of economics, that wages tend to equal productivity, because if there's any divergence, market forces come into bear and stop it.
Yeah, actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you might recognize this book, Economic Insights, is
Who's the author?
Jason DiMartino.
Yeah. What about the book?
It's got your quote on the back. I believe he has a section in here about the
read what I wrote on the back.
Productivity. It says, DiMartino is a young scholar who will soon be considered a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, wow. I wish you would have sent me that book. I wrote a blurb for him. He should send me them. But on the other hand, I've been away from my office for 3 months, so it might be sitting in my office when I get back.
It might. Yeah, I'll definitely let him know that you should send that to you. He just got it published a few weeks ago, and so I grabbed one on Amazon. And yeah, I believe he told me that he had a section in here that actually goes over that in depth, and some similar things to what you said. And also he goes into like the deflators they used, to measure inflation and stuff like that, because there's just so many different factors that goes into, both productivity and wages. And then just to, put together a chart like that and miss so much, it's just and people rest like whole arguments on that one graph.
And it's almost a half hour, and I've sort of allotted a half hour, so maybe you have 1 or 2 more questions or comments, and we can finish.
Let me think. I did have I had an article that I was kind of going over to kind of like a pro minimum wage article, and I wanted to see if there was any arguments that they presented in it that I could turn over to you, but pretty much all of it was addressed already, or it's just claims that you never even made in the first place, or claims neither one of us would even make about the $15 minimum wage. So I think that's about it.
Okay, well, let me just
video. But if you want to say anything else, then
let me make a final comment in the last minute or so that we've got. If the minimum wage really were a floor under wages and it raised wages, why are we being so cheapskatey about it? Why 15? Why not 25? Why not 2,500? Why not $1 million? I mean, if that theory were correct, that the minimum wage law raises wages, why 15? 15 is pathetic. Even Bernie Sanders doesn't really want 15. He's only doing 15 as a vehicle toward 25 or 50 or whatever he wants. I don't know. It's inconsistent with their theory. Now, we do have this thing called foreign aid. A poor country needs money. Why don't we just stop? I'm now addressing this to lefties. Why don't we just stop all foreign aid and tell these poor countries to raise your minimum wage? Raise your minimum wage and you'll all be rich. I mean, this is preposterous. This is a fallacy. And the proof of it is if you, this is called the reductio ad absurdum, namely you take their logic and you push it a little bit. Their logic is minimum wage law raises wages. So let's raise wages. Let's make it 100,000 an hour and we'll all be as rich as, I don't know, Bill Gates. Let's stop foreign aid. Let's just tell poor countries, hey, we got the solution for you. Raise wages and we'll all be rich. If you ever get a person on your radio show or, who favors minimum wage and you want to be devil's advocate, pull that one on them. Now, the answer that they'll give is a thing called monopsony, not monopoly, but monopsony. And you have to have intermediate microeconomics to understand what that is all about. And I'm not going to go into it now. For that, I'd really need some diagrams. But monopsony is the idea that only one employer can hire people. Well, I don't know how many employers there are in the United States. There must be several 100 million. I don't know how many, but so monopsony is just silly. And monopsony only applies to things where like engineers of a special kind are hired and the engineer can only work in one company. Whereas I said, I could not only work in a shoe company, I'm the $20 an hour guy. I could work making shirts. I could work making chairs. I could do lots of things. So monopsony doesn't apply. That would be their answer, and it's a pathetic answer. But that would be a good reductio to try on them. Why be so cheapskatey and just raise it to 15? Let's go 100,000 an hour, and we'll all be rich. I gotta go. Send me the URL for this, and it's been good talking to you.